And I'm going to call us to order at 6:06. And I think, Liz, you have the minutes template, right? Okay, great. And I know Gabby is listening in from Middlebury College from the Community Engagement Office. I will just ask if she or anyone else has any public comment. Okay, so then if I could get a motion to approve our minutes from March. I don't know, were you there, Sandy?
I was not there, so that's why I was not moving.
Okay, Liz, can you just make that motion? Okay, and both of us, I think, are good to approve those. So what I really wanted to talk about is the meat of the agenda. Two goals. One is to see if we can't get content and timing set to do a thought exchange around the Levinson report. And then the other is to generate topics so I can start a draft for our next community update. And those are both on the agenda. I was realizing that I usually call it the April column, but to be clear, it appears in the Addison Independent, but it also goes on Front Porch Forum and the website. And it's Patrick often or always will send it out on an email blast to all MAUSD. So that's a great way to communicate with folks. So anyways, from the first part is the thought exchange. So we really, as you probably all know, we haven't done much with the Levinson report since we got the final version in February. And then we directed Patrick to explore the internal workings of cost-effective mindset and bounded autonomy, and working with an outside consultant to do that. And then March came and March got really busy. And so here we are. And so this is a time to reinvigorate those conversations about the report. And I think it was mentioned even at our last board meeting, hey, we really need to get back to that and spend time on that. And I think Don did a survey of board members getting priorities for our meetings, and that came out as the top one. So what we had talked about in a previous community engagement committee meeting was how we might want to engage with people around that report. And, you know, Nate presented a summary of it in January, and then we got the final version in February. But that was really presented to the board, and we didn't engage with the community about it other than sharing it out just as it is, as a document. So in talking with the Thought Exchange folks about that tool and how it can help with these big long-term processes and products, which the report is kind of like a product. Sometimes it can help to first start with just getting general reflections and asking people what questions they have. That would be one exchange. And then as the decision-making body is starting to explore more specific options, then you might go back out to the community and ask specifically about a couple of pieces of that. And then there might be even a third pass. So it would be this kind of iterative process of kind of informing and reinforming the community about this facilities planning work, and then asking for, seeing what questions come up and asking for specific feedback as we go along. So we're kind of starting with that first, my idea and my thinking was to do an initial thought exchange where it's really just asking the question, what are your thoughts and questions about this summary of this report? And after the last meeting, Kim Callahan and Coco helped me to work on a draft, which is in the agenda. And I don't know if you've had a chance to, I had high hopes of sending it way sooner than yesterday or last night. So totally understand if you haven't had a chance to look at it that closely yet. But our thinking was, this is such a big report. How are we going to share this and get feedback on it in a thought exchange? And so can we winnow down all that content into some of the highlights. And that's what that summary is attempting to do. And then Coco went through and identified some keywords in the entire report, but some of them specifically in the summary that might be helpful to define for people. So the idea is that we would share a link to this summary along with the thought exchange and ask that question, okay, what do you think about this summary? What initial reactions do you have and what questions do you have? And the way I understand it is we can actually go into the thought exchange almost like an FAQ and answer some of those questions as people bring them to us. So it's kind of a great way to interact with people and get them to understand a little bit more about this really important and big investment we made into the work with NAET. So they're better informed as we start having conversations at the board table about that report. So that's kind of the first way that I was imagining we would engage with the community. And when we meet with the staff at the end of April, we've been talking about embarking on conversations between the staff and the board. And when the small working group with some staff members and some board members, we landed on looking at the Levinson report. So what's great is I think our timing can work out really well that we will be sharing this summary with the community, but then also with the staff, and on our April 26th board meeting, then having a chance to talk with them in a smaller group setting about what they think about the report. So I think that's important that we're engaging with them as well. So my hope for tonight is to get your feedback on that summary and the keywords document and using the thought exchange, and if that kind of seems digestible enough to folks.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So I'll stop there and just said a lot so far, get just initial comments and reactions.
I like the draft. I thought it pulled together pretty succinctly what the issues were. What kind of really, when I read through the report and having gone through the whole report before, the part that really jumps out to me is the part with the merger, and all mention of the merger, like next steps and things of that sort. Only because were any of you guys in the meeting of the merger study committee last night? You were, Liz? Oh yeah, you were there, Liz. That's right.
And
were you there,
Don, as well?
Right. It's really interesting to me, like I know at our last board meeting, we had talked about how to maybe figure out a way to for the individual boards, school boards, to somehow connect in some way with the merger study committee. I realize it's sort of we're the ones who sort of tasked them. And yet, like, here's this body that I feel like there's all these differing considerations and I think about that's I made a comment during the public comment, just, the Levinson report really talked about what I think is important in this draft, that to make this successful, to really focus on keeping community schools, we really do have to do some sort of merger. That's really what they came together to me. You guys can correct me, but that was the impression I got. Mm-hmm. And so, but what is that merger and the importance of that, and does it really rely on merging middle schools and high schools, and then of course what's the actual ability for that to really happen when we have an entire another district where at least a few meetings back I got the impression that, like, we're not going to close our high school. do you know? And so I'm just thinking realistically, like, how, I know that I think a thought exchange would be wonderful in this, because I would probably put a little thought exchange on, realistically, how are we going to do this merger, and what does that really, involve, and have the numbers really been considered? Have the boards been, consulted? What are their communities, saying? Because Addison Northwest has really whittled down everything already, right? In terms of, I think they're as small as they can be.
They're just about out of options, I think.
Right. Like they have
need-
closed
yeah.
schools, right? They closed Addison. Who else did they close? Panton?
I don't know.
Right. And so, I'm just putting that out there. I think the draft is great. I think a thought exchange around it is a great idea because it will give people the different sections, like, maybe something on next steps, because I really feel like we've tasked administration to do the hard work of really thinking about cost effective mindedness, right? Which I think is really good. I think that process is starting on how do we do that for our smaller school, community schools. But I really feel the direction in terms of from us on what are we going to do about what the numbers are saying, between now and 2030 in terms of the decrease in our school, like, our numbers. How are we going to deal with that? Has anyone actually projected I actually like Levinson's report probably does, but what does that number look like? And I don't know if that's been brought up to the merger study committee as well, like the actual fiscal significance, of what's happening. And I would love for them to really, I realize I have to come up with a structure, but what is that going to be? I know I'm sort of rambling there, and it's a huge question. I am all about trying to figure out how to make, for Jen's, the Addison Northwest and our MAUSD and maybe even Middlebury to somehow come together to really look at our numbers and consolidate in one high school. I am a huge proponent of Coco's proposal if people would take it seriously, and I can't figure out a way to make that happen. I know Nate had said he would consider it when I had asked, but I think it takes a lot more. He emailed me back and said, I'll look into that. But it takes more. It would be huge for someone to make an actual proposal, have to bring builders to really consider, can you build like one state-of-the-art high school sized to Addison Northwest, to Mount Abe, and to Middlebury, and then continue to have middle school potentially in each of those communities with this high school that you could really have really rich access, funding, numbers, you bet, the whole thing. So I'm sure this will be, as a community member or separately, I'll be putting those in that thought exchange because I think it's potentially a solution for our communities. Otherwise, they're just going to keep shrinking. And I don't know how we're going to be able to provide what we want for our kids and at the same time not bus them, overly long distances. Is that still an obstacle, Liz, from the merger study committee perspective?
Sorry, was that a question for Liz? Because she's not on the committee.
Oh, she's not? She's just
No.
but I know she can be public.
I'm just always there. I'm supposed to, I'm at the ready and waiting to get student and staff feedback was my thing. So we had just really I just keep letting them know I'm ready when they're ready. And I know Stephanie Rossier is ready when they're ready as well. But so
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to come back to the merger study piece, but I did want to just ask Liz and Don, if you're willing to be more than just a listener, what you think about this summary and how it will fold into a thought exchange. Is it concise enough? Does it hit the highlights? And if you haven't had a chance to look at it closely enough, that's
I've definitely
Behaviors, yeah, I've heard of them.
sorry. I've definitely
No
looked at it and okay. All right. Definitely looked at it and I like it. I think it's good. It's kind of interesting. Like you can see when I read it, I can hear the voice of the different people, right? Like that. And so I think it did a good job at summarizing. And I could work on getting some definitions into the keywords list. I did have one person actually email me and ask what MAUSD and Addison Northwest Supervisory, and their initials, what that meant. I got an email asking that in
that's a good
response to the
point.
front porch. So
Yeah, that's
I
a
think
really
I'd
good
love
point
that.
with the acronyms.
Yes, so I'll go in and maybe I could work on adding some definitions there. And the only thing that I missed that I wanted to ask was the first thought exchange. What are your thoughts? What are your questions? And the second one, your idea for that, did you have a specific idea? And then I wrote possibly a third in the minute.
Not necessarily. And I think what I'm imagining is it would parallel the board's conversation. So right now we're like in digestion mode. And so we want to let the community kind of be in that place with us. But if we start, I think it was brought up at the last board meeting. Wow, like what about 6th grade going to Mount Abe? Like that's low hanging fruit. That was highly, I don't want to say recommended because Nate said he wouldn't recommend anything, but that was something that he said could be an easy win for savings. So if we start to go down a path of wanting to know more about any of those particular options, then I think another exchange would be more focused in on several options. So folks have the initial context of the overall report, and then we would go back to them with honing in. So, and I don't know yet what that is that we're going to hone in on, but it seems like that was the idea from the thought exchange folks, is that you're kind of like funneling in as you're moving forward, with touch points with the community. And that makes good sense to me. And I did want to say, though, to your point, Sandy, that I wondered how to incorporate the work of the merger study committee into this summary, because it's a separate entity, but I wound up adding a sentence or two in next steps because it's happening concurrently, but it is part of this process. It's not our process, but it's informing our process. And so, I know maybe you suggested this, Sandy, and I think this would be a good question for the board is, do we want to ask anything specifically about the merger in this thought exchange, or is that not our work? I think that the merger study committee has plans to do engagement through different points in their process. And so maybe that's their work, but I think in general, as we are communicating with people about what we're doing, pointing them to the information they can find about the merger study committee work is really important. And what how we make sense of that work, like not positional, but more just here's what they're working on, and here's the points for, here's where they're at.
Yeah, I have to say that, like, I haven't watched every meeting by far, but they're very interesting every time I do watch them, to get a sense of sort of the differing views and where people come from on the board, obviously from the different districts mostly, because it's a different perspective, right? And this, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it made me think that you'd mentioned that it's their work, not our work, but we charged them, didn't we, together with Addison Northwest to do this work. They get their authority through us, right?
Right.
And so in essence, it's like it's a committee. It's a committee that we from the 2 school boards put out to them to say, do this work. What I find weird is that we created this committee, but we don't get any reporting out. Like we're a committee made by MAUSD, and we report and only do anything based on the full board. It's
right. They're not a committee of this board. They're their own entity, and we
charged them with certain.
We said, hey, we want to do this, and to do this, we think, we agree that a 706B is the way to do it, and we're going to send some board reps, but
then the board reps aren't, I'm not sure they're comfortable representing the board as opposed to just happen to be board members who are part of the committee. Do you know? Yeah, I don't know. Wondered how they feel, because it's kind of weird that way as well. So I have to say, it reminds me sort of the whole process that happened with Lincoln seceding. It's like, we started this merger study process, and I feel like we could change it if we wanted to.
Yeah, I
or
don't think we can. I think that's the thing that is,
oh, we could let them know what we think as a
well,
board.
yeah, I mean,
I mean,
that's
that I think is important.
so, and I think that's a conversation for us to talk about as a full board and figure out what that would look like and what we want to do with that. But my point was really, I think it's really important, like you said, right out of the gate, about the value of a merger to the overall sustainability of our district as a part, and that's a part of this report that we got from Nate. And so we want to keep people really informed about what's happening there.
Yeah, I agree.
And that what I guess I'm not sure about, and maybe Don or Liz have other opinion or other thoughts to share on that, is what I'm not sure about is how deep into at this stage, how deep into the feedback we get specifically on what the merger study committee is doing.
I mean, I get the sense they're going to come to us at some point and say,
Yes.
What do you think?
Right.
Give it your input. I mean, I hope they do.
Yes. I mean, and it's in, if you look at their work plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and it looked like if their current work plan is going to happen this way, that they are going to be doing some community engagement in May on the draft articles
Okay.
that they're proposing. And then they're going to consider feedback from the boards in June. And then they're going to do more community engagement leading up to a vote if they're going to propose a merger and recommend a vote. So there's a couple different places where there will be feedback, which is why I'm not sure if it's our role to solicit really deep feedback on that at this point. I guess that's what I'm.
Although I would encourage anybody in our district to take part in the community engagement.
Absolutely.
Of the merger, right? Because
absolutely.
But at the same
absolutely.
time, it'd be interesting. I want to also hear from them before June, before we give comments about our input. It'd be nice if we somehow, because we are the link. I mean, if I didn't realize, I should have looked at the work plan more carefully. So it makes me think now, if in June they're going to come to us as board members, as a board, and get our input on what we think of their draft proposal, it makes me realize, well, what is our community? We're making sure that they know what it is, and what do they think of the merger study, so that we can then keep that in mind together, our work in Nate Levinson's report, and then give our input. So like, I want to be that, now that we're here, now I'm thinking about it more, we need to be that linkage for our community when we get to actually speak as board members looking at everything in June. Does that make
and
sense?
I don't know how Oregon, I am curious, maybe this is a question we can ask our reps. We can ask Kevin and Sarah and Brad and Dave. Do they know yet what the merger study committee's engagement plan is going to look like?
I think they're working on it still, I think.
Yeah. And then how can we spread the word about that and get our own community to participate across a broad and diverse spectrum to really, engage in that.
Right. Like if they don't do a thought exchange, Krista, for example, as part of their community engagement, when the draft merger study proposal does come out, maybe for our district, we do a community exchange around those draft proposal when it comes out, so that we can gather that information for our purposes, and be like, oh, that's interesting. And then we can look at it from the lens of all the other information and the work that we've done on the board, really incorporating in our head the Nate Levinson report. How do these two things dovetail or not, and hopefully maybe when we see their proposal, we can narrow a few questions or thought exchange ideas So we have that information. So
Mhm.
we can then add to it, hey, because they may not do a thought exchange, but we can, and then we can provide that data,
Yeah,
maybe potentially.
right. And it
Maybe-
also might
yeah.
be the case if when we do this initial thought exchange and we're not asking specifically about anything, we're just saying, what are your thoughts and feelings and questions? But it might be if all the questions or thoughts are about the merger study, we could share that with the committee to say,
Yeah.
hey, we did this thought exchange about the Nate Levinson proposal, but we got a lot of feedback about this particular piece and we'd like to share that with you.
Right. Right. I like
Yeah,
that.
'cause I think-
like that.
Because also they also have an active community engagement committee over in their district. So
Yeah.
I would think that we would be, if they were to instigate something that, or like have their draft articles, that they could also, like there's some teamwork stuff, because that
Totally.
also, when we talk about the diverse engagement, right, we also mean their district, right? So
Right.
maybe.
Yeah, and I don't know if they are a
thing.
thought exchange district, but I know Christina Christina McCullen was the chair of their community engagement committee. So we could even use our subscription to do something
Mhm.
with the
Mhm.
two.
That would be interesting. It'd be interesting to see the difference between the two thought exchanges because of just the different nature of their district and how their schools are run. They have different perspective. That would be interesting too.
Yeah. So if we do an exchange with this draft, what I was thinking on the 12th, I'm thinking before the 12th, before Tuesday, this week, what do you think I should just share that summary with the full board?
Yeah.
And invite people to give feedback on it and see if they, getting the thumbs up.
I think
yes.
that'd be great. I think that'd be
Okay,
great.
so because what I'd love is timing wise, if we can go to the full board on Tuesday to say, hey, we want to do a thought exchange. You saw the summary, and these are the dates. You all good with it? Awesome.
That sounds good. And get their input too, because I'm sure they'll have some good thoughts.
Yeah. So I'm wondering timing wise, if you guys think we should wait till after April break to do it, or do it. The turnaround time of setting it up from when we have our board meeting, if everybody gives feedback and says they like the idea, to actually doing it, makes it fall probably during April break. And so I'm thinking that might not be the best idea, which means it would probably happen the last week in April.
Can you get the approval on the 12th and just time it maybe later so it's not during break? The only reason I say it might be good to bring it on the 12th, because for all we know, we might get all kinds of input and we may not have consensus. I don't know that.
Yeah. Right. So that's what I'm saying. I think it'll be too fast to turn around to do it before break.
Right. And but if we start on the 12th, sometime after break, we'll probably be ready to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys agree it's probably not a great idea to try to do it during April break. Yeah. Who knows where people are going to be?
And they might be in a different state of
somewhere
mind.
away from a computer.
That's great. Thank you for all that work, for everybody who did work on the draft. It's a lot to put that together.
Kim Callahan did the heavy lifting, and then I went in and tried to make it a little more concise. And so I'm struggling a little on this, I guess, as I'll ask the board specifically for this feedback, is the way the thought exchange is set up. It would be a link that people would have to go to read this and then respond.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a balance of making sure you hit the highlights, hit all the good info, and being concise. And that's what I'm hoping we can achieve. So
yeah, I would send it out to those guys. And I mean, I've read it, but I'm going to go back again and try to give, more precise comment, and thoughts. I'm going to go through it again and again before the meeting on the 12th. Do we have a worksheet that we can provide ahead of time, like when we do for reports? Or we'll just talk about it on Tuesday?
You mean if you have any feedback about it?
Yeah, we do worksheets for other reports.
I could even make a copy of it that I share. Oh, we can't do that, actually. I was going to say.
Oh, probably because you have to just
Open
submit it
meeting
and
law. I was going to say, it'd be great
Um,
if people could comment right on the document electronically, but I don't think you can do that.
Right.
So
We could send it to you though, not without discussion, but if people want to send stuff ahead of time, and then that way you can have a bunch, if people are so willing.
yeah, so Don, I
Oh,
don't know if you're
yeah.
hearing this, but you know how when you have a Google Doc, if you make your comments, but if we don't discuss it, could people put their comments on there and then we talk through it live? I don't know if she's there.
Yeah, she might. You know how with compliance reports, sorry, I'm not thinking of a
Monitoring reports?
monitoring. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Monitoring reports. We can submit input to
Oh.
Dawn ahead of meetings.
Yeah.
And then that way she can keep them to sort
Mhm.
of like be able to see sort of what people are thinking.
Yeah.
Not that people, I keep saying I should be good about sending those reports, but I'm not, but but I know some of our members are good about, sending written comment, which is always, I think, probably helpful too, for you when it comes time.
Yeah. It's super
meeting.
helpful. Maybe
Yeah.
we won't. Yeah. I mean, people could just email me.
Yeah, just like I point out, just email if you have comments, and that way you can compile them. There isn't any discussion. It's just
Right.
sending you their comments so you can sort of have in your mind, oh, this is interesting what people are
Yep.
thinking from the report.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And then
Thank you, Kim.
the keywords that are, I think, my agenda, that are linked to the agenda.
Mhm.
This is not the right version. So there, I have a version of this that just highlights the ones that are in the summary. There are much fewer ones in the summary than on this list. Let's see.
Mhm.
Oh, here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's like 7. So I don't know if that's something we want to ask Patrick, if he and his team could give the definitions. I don't know who the most appropriate person is to define these. I mean, it feels to me like it should be one of the folks in that most know. But I
Yeah,
also
they've been explaining the definition. Like, I'm sure it's just off the top of their head because
Right.
they've spent so much time in this work and they're working with Nate anyway.
Yeah.
So if they needed support from him, he could help, right?
Okay. So I think then maybe on Tuesday, I'll just put out that idea, like, because just if it's okay for them to fill in what we need for the summary and not necessarily worry about all the other concepts right now. But I like the idea of, I'm glad Coco raised that point of, like what you were saying, Liz, about even acronyms that are so second nature to us, something which seems so second nature, like MAUSD, AN, whatever it is, ANSWD.
I'm still just remembering MTSS, multi-tier systems of support.
Right. And you know what the words are, but then could you define it even? That's the next step, right?
Well, there's the intense, there's like the levels. I can't remember off the top of my head, but right. Yeah, no, they should definitely be the ones to do it. That would be super.
Okay. Okay. So I think I know what I'll share, and both of you can chime in, please, on the 12th. And then what will happen at the last meeting in April, where we're trying to figure out how to incorporate this summary into the conversation that we have with staff, which I think is going to be great, and it will follow. So Nate is coming to talk with us specifically about the cost effectiveness mindset proposal and what that work is going to look like. But we were hoping
in April, the end of April.
April 26th.
Yep.
Yeah. But we were thinking, if he's coming and you're going to talk about that, and we want to have a conversation about his report with staff, maybe he could lead with providing some overview to what his report shared, then that cost effectiveness mindset info, and then we'll be able to break out into groups and talk with staff about what they heard, which I think I'm really excited about,
No, that's,
because what I really want to do is to have us also do an in-person or virtual community forum about the report. So I guess my point is I don't want to just do the thought exchange.
I
It's a
agree.
starting point, but I really think it would be great to be having more conversations with people.
And people are coming out of the woodwork too. I'm feeling like people are
Yeah.
feeling like they can really start beginning to have real person-to-person contact again. I think that would
Yep.
be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So then the only other thing is to think about topics for our column. And usually what I do is I make a list of ideas that people come up with and then start a draft and send it around for feedback. And today's Tuesday. We have our board meeting next Tuesday, so it might make sense to try to run it the week between our two board meetings. So it could include anything that comes out of our meeting on the 12th. I'm not sure if we'll have anything. I'm trying to remember what our 12th meeting is going to include, but other than what that meeting might include, what are some topics? Like, we can let people know about the thought exchange, that
Mhm.
that's coming out, and these are the dates.
And maybe about if Nate, if you can get some confirmation about Nate's re-summarizing his report and talking about
That presentation.
that
Yeah.
meeting. Yep. And I don't know if we wanted to do anything with the merger study committee highlights that they put together.
Yep.
I like that, like all three of those. I think that's great. Also, just to really highlight again that Nate's going to be presenting at the April
Yep.
26th meeting, because I think people really, it's really nice for the community to be part of that. Where do those highlights show up, Liz, for the merger study? Does it show up off of our website and it shows up, or do they have a separate? I need to go find that.
I find, yeah, so on our website, the merger study committee has a link, and then they have their agendas and minutes. And on all of their minutes,
Right.
there are highlights from the previous meeting are linked onto, or on all of their agendas, from the previous meeting are on there.
Maybe put that link too in the article, just as a reminder if people
Mhm.
want to go there. It's always so nice to have a reminder of like, oh, this is where you can go, kind of thing.
Yeah. We
even
have, for the
a
column, we have a template, and it usually, I think at the beginning and at the end, it refers people to different places to go for more info. So that'll be on there. And the merger study committee is looking for our help in getting their briefs out on Front Porch Forum more regularly. And so getting help from our board members to post their briefs
Okay.
as they come out. So we can talk about that with the full board.
And maybe the upgrades planned at Mount Aid, maybe. I
Oh,
know
yeah.
we posted the video, right? But that's could be something to mention.
Mhm.
And then it's just hard because my mind starts going to just great things that are happening at the schools, or I don't know. So
Yeah,
like the spring play, the spelling bee.
Mm-hmm.
So my only concern is if it becomes school highlights, it's not really board work
Sure.
highlights. And I want to celebrate our schools, but where would we even begin and end? Because that would be a lot. There's so much. So yeah, I'm not sure we can take that on.
Possibly the new principal at Bristol Elementary. That's board work. I feel maybe not. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. The other one I was thinking,
yeah.
oh, go ahead. I was just going to, oh. No, you go.
I don't know. I just, in my mind, I think also at some point for the thought exchange is reminding me that, like, for instance, one of those topics that we might come across down the road would be, we could use it for the choice. Because they did take a vote at the merger study committee about that, about possibly moving forward in a direction, agreeing to talk about it again, and possibly not agree on their agreement that they had at the time. You know what I mean? Like, it was very like half the people
How's that for
abstained.
decisive?
Yeah.
I would wait for their brief. I want to see their brief of what they actually decided when they did the vote, because I listened through that process. And if I had been a vote, I would have been like, if you don't know what you're voting on, don't vote on it. Because it was super, super confusing. And of course, I didn't have the written stuff in front of me. So it's a little harder when you can't see option 1 and option 2. I'm a little wary of posting anything because honestly, it's not clear to me, because they also were very clear that they had to bring it up again and talk about amendments to it. They just wanted to keep moving forward, because they've been spending so much time. And so they wanted to just decide on something, but then literally they're like, we have to come back at a certain meeting to go over this again, because they may very well change it. I think they're going to at their next meeting, or refine it. So
we may not be there yet for including it in this highlights, but
Right.
at some point, possibly for a thought exchange, like that would be one of the things down along the road.
Well, it's funny you brought up school choice, because that's what I was going to say, Liz, about, I looked at our agenda on the 12th, which is that we're going to have a conversation about different policies. So if this column isn't going to come out till after our board meeting on the 12th, we might share that we discussed that, or share, what we're pondering. Because I do think that that's our work, and that's brewing. So yeah,
it's a good topic. That's a good highlight if we can get it in there.
And I think I could ask the full board too, if they have anything else to add, because again, as I'm thinking about our timing, it's probably going to go out the week after our board meeting. So we'll see if other people have anything to add. Okay. So
and we're still looking for a board member are we looking for anyone else? I'm sorry. I just off the top of my head, have we got our New Haven person. We don't need a clerk, or we've got everything. All our positions are stacked. Hannaford Career Center, were we still looking for a community rep to that? No. Okay. I lost track of that. Thank you, Krista. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's a good question. Amazingly and gratefully, we've filled all the positions.
It's a good thing.
So that is all that I have on my agenda. Shortest meeting ever.
Can I just ask you guys?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't look at the agenda, and I should see what's going up. Do you know if we're going to have on the agenda how we're going to deal with Lincoln and the vote? Is that anywhere, or is that something that's just much farther off?
It's not on the agenda, but what specifically do you mean?
Well, eventually, I mean, depending on what happens with the merger or not, if there isn't one, we as a board and a district, we have part, I think, of that, their process of leaving is coming to a negotiation with the supervisory union to exit, or meaning our district to exit. And is that a board process? I mean, I don't know. These are the things I don't know, but if it's a board process to do so, right? Not just an administrative superintendent process. Are we just wanting to know down the road, what do we need to know to be prepared for, like, what steps maybe the board has to take eventually? And that may be like far off, and that's probably, I should be writing this to Dawn as possible future agenda item, but it makes me just want to be aware of it, because it came up during the merger study committee, like, what do we do what do we do if not, how do you treat it? It was interesting just to be reminded of that, and it made me wonder, does it affect our work presently? Probably not presently, but at some point down the road. And honestly, I thought about just also, when you have those negotiations, like me as a Lincoln representative, like, how does that work?
Right.
Interesting questions. And so, but I don't want to be behind, on those issues and have them like surprise us if all of a sudden there were things we should have been thinking about and doing, as that process rolls out, because I think we do still play a role. There's always a question of, there can be all kinds of agreements. I mean, Ripton had his experience where, they couldn't get Addison South, whatever the district is in Middlebury, they couldn't get them to come to an agreement to let them share certain services or to do things in conjunction. That's not necessarily what will happen in our district. It's really, I think it's a negotiation of, what is in the best.
That's right.
Works. And so I feel like there must be some board say in that process. I can't imagine that there wouldn't be.
Yeah, I don't know when that happens. Like where in the Lincoln timeline that is, because it's like a 12-step process, and I think they're only on step 3, maybe even, or 4.
Right.
But maybe that's a question we can ask Patrick, like where are they at in the timeline, and at what point in that timeline would this board need to have conversations and information about an exit agreement?
Right.
I think it's still a little ways away, but I think your point is like to have it on the radar so that we can be informed before the conversation happens. I'm not sure when that is, but.
And also to anticipate community engagement around it. Like a lot, just like I'm wondering, I'm sure our community is going, how does this work? How does this affect our communities, and how are we going to communicate with them, and then also get information back if there are decisions we have to make, right? Like, I don't know, and I'm professing not knowing, but I'm putting it out there just as a thought hanging there, so that I just want to be prepared for it, when we get to a place, and know that we as a community engagement committee said, okay, we don't have to worry about this till about here, but at least we know we've got, that, because it always takes time to roll out, right? The communication out, communication in. I want to make sure we have enough cushion to know when about we should be making sure we start doing that, because I really do think that whole change is really important to hear from all the community members of what they think. And they may also want to know, how does it work? What are the options, if there are any?
Yeah, I'm just looking back.
I don't even know. I got to research this too. I don't really know all the steps. I mean,
So our last update, was it that one? No, I'm just trying to find our last update to see if we reference the Lincoln withdrawal vote. And I don't think we did. I think oh no, we did. We did say, we had the first paragraph was about the vote to ratify the withdrawal, and that this is the second in a 10-step process. And next they have to submit a plan for withdrawal. And then if that is approved conditionally, then they negotiate with MAUSD on an exit plan that actually, it sounds like all voters must approve.
Oh,
so it sounds like, yes, we're going to have to do some community engagement for sure around what that exit plan is going to look like, because people are going to have to vote to support it. But what I was looking for, though, was, and I don't see, was even just what the remaining MAUSD, like, when will Lincoln, I know this is something my own kids were like, so is Lincoln going to be in our school next year? Like, just even like letting folks know this isn't going to happen until at least before this date.
Right.
Even that basic level of information, like after that vote, my son's trying to figure out if any of his Lincoln buddies are going to be at Mount Abe next year, kind of thing. So
totally.
So that is something we did not include, and might be worth mentioning.
Do we know when do they have a deadline for that exit plan?
I don't know.
Obviously, if we know when that comes about, we can help communicate those things too, especially if it gets approved by the State Board of Education. We can talk about that down the road, right?
I think kind of like we had this, hey, let's not really talk about extreme sister schools and all of that until the plan has been decided. Remember, right? Like I'm nervous about that, right? Like all of that and how that will look, but we're gonna wait until they've given us a plan, right? So with this one, I think it's gonna be similarly very important to for those who are anxious about it. We really got to get the state board approval first before we can do anything with that. We're not going to know. They have their whole, I mean, they kind of carved out in a new chapter 11. They gave Lincoln their own little spot. They gave Ripton their own little spot because they had started the process before the changes were in place. But they still have to do the process, right? So the Agency of Education, I think, really needs to look at it and do that. And I don't think we can say much until then because I just don't think we can. So,
But as far as timing though, are there any guidelines as far as like not before, I mean, we know obviously it's not going to impact the next academic year, but I guess this is a question for Patrick.
yeah, it wouldn't be
Can we
next
make
year.
any kind of statement like for sure not before, but beyond that we don't know. Like what are the that might be
For sure, definitely for sure not next year, right?
Right.
Because they're already in our budget. Like that budget
Right.
has already been passed, and we're doing all of that, and they need time to create their own. I think I've heard the group say that they hope to start on the following year.
23,
But,
20 23, 24. But that's hope and not known. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
It's good to
Yeah.
know.
I know it's hard to know.
Mhm.
You want to share all the information you have, but when you don't have a lot of information, is it harmful to share what you don't know? I don't know. Not harmful, but
Mhm.
Just
tricky.
we're just making those assumptions, right? And
Or
then
getting people worked up or anxious or
and we might be
confused.
making the wrong assumption, right? And then yeah.
So just mostly just to have it on the radar, because I can see at some point we might begin to get more clarity. And it makes me realize just on an education piece for the board, I think I really lack education on really how this process is going to work. I'm wondering, I should probably write down again and be like, maybe at some point when it's appropriate, just even educate us about this process.
Well,
so that we understand it appropriately, and that what we don't know, also what we can't know yet as we go through each step.
yeah, I think that's helpful. And, like I'm always having to remind myself about even reiterating what we already do know with the community, because folks tune in and out at different points. And so it might be that whether it's in a column in the Addy Indy or a standing agenda item for our board, like updates on the Lincoln withdrawal, like that we always say something, whatever that something is. It might just be still in the works, or they're still at step 2, or so
yeah,
because if you don't read the column 1 month where we say this is what's next. Yeah,
and it's the elephant in the room,
right,
a lot, and I think it's important to demystify it.
Yeah,
and just be like, this is the reality. These are the steps. This is the work we have to do, and we just got to go along the steps and see what happens. It's not I realize that people think it's a done deal, and maybe it is, but it isn't necessarily. I always kind of say, who knows? It changes. I mean, the likelihood is that that's the direction it will go. I mean, has Ripton actually separated officially? Have they even? I don't even.
They haven't.
Mm-mm.
They've gone before the board and they have not had an approved plan at this point. So they're still in that process. I think Stowe is the furthest along at this point.
But they're still in it too at this point as well. So it can do, and it still ultimately has to be approved, right? By the state.
Well, no, they can, they can still have it voted even if it's unapproved by the state board. It can still be voted through. But the deal is that where the state board holds people accountable is that if they're not meeting the needs, that are required by state law for students of what we're required to offer. So the towns can still vote it through even without necessarily state board approval, I believe. And that's either a new change or it's the way that it is now or something. I don't really remember exactly because they're discussing like 4 different versions. And so,
Has the change?
but my understanding is that the towns have the ultimate, control, but they still have to meet certain standards, right? And if they're not meeting the education quality standards, which are also reviewing and redoing, then that's where the problem lies.
Is it passed? The change? Is there an official passed bill? Not yet.
That it moved from the House to the Senate Education Committee at this point, and they are having their conversations now.
Okay, so it's still in process. Okay, so I thought.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Liz, have you thought about being our VSBA rep?
I know.
You
this
are
point-
so tuned in to what's happening in the legislature, and I so appreciate the amount of time you spend
Mhm.
thinking about those things, because it's incredibly valuable to have somebody really tuning in. And
At the state level.
I've
yeah,
listened to the VSBA meetings, a couple of them, right? I do it on double speed. So
Yeah.
it's not that much
Right.
time. And I
right.
skip the things like universal school meals. Obviously, we all want that. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of figuring out the money. So I skip all the
Mhm.
things that I already know. But when chapter 11 comes up, it's like, slow it down, right? And
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
close. But Dave is doing a good job. He's participating in
Mhm.
that and
Oh, good.
giving possibly very, I might have different input, but I would say he's probably representing the majority of us in our feedback pretty well. He's probably overall, I think that he's doing a good job representing us on the VSBA, and he's giving his input and all that. But someday maybe it's like,
Yeah,
but yeah,
right.
so I appreciate
Thank
him
you.
as well.
Thank you for tuning in.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The other thing that was just making me think about is whether we want to say anything. Say anything about Stark Sparrow and what they're pursuing. And I don't know. I think they had a select board meeting, or they're having it now. They're having it
Oh, are
tonight.
they?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's why Nancy couldn't be here.
Is it on
So,
Zoom? Is it a Zoom link?
I'm sorry.
They have a Zoom link. Oh God, that would be an interesting meeting to watch.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Again, I guess we'll probably know more on the 12th, if not before then. But it would be good to think about what we might want to offer from our board perspective as that's unfolding as well.
Yeah, it's really, it's like, yeah, I'm curious to see what comes out of today's meeting. Like, are
Mhm.
they really as organized and as serious as Lincoln was, and Ripton and Stowe and the other communities that actually made it happen?
Mhm.
And is that really what's going to happen? And that really significantly affects our district, just like everything else is board reps.
Yeah, I mean, their approach is different in that they have 2 built-in off-ramps. And they're really all that they're focused solely on that article of agreement in the merger study committee for towns' right to vote before closure.
Yeah, last night's meeting would not have voted well. They voted for number 2,
Mhm.
which was not supportive of putting it in there. That's
Right.
my impression.
But so
I
there,
was like, "Oh."
but so the Stark Sparrow petition though says either will stay either if there's a merger, but that article remains that we have the right to vote, which you're saying doesn't sound likely, or if there is no merger, we'll stay. So my wondering is, if it's so wildly unpopular to not have that article in there,
Yeah.
how likely is it going to be that a merger happens? In which case, that's why Stark Sparrow wrote their petition the way they did, so that they're keeping all doors open to MAUSD while still maintaining their town right to vote. So it's a different,
Yeah.
it's
And-
a different approach.
Right. And that should be more clear too. The merger study committee just really wanted to go ahead and just sort of go forward with something. It
Right.
sounds like they may amend it. And they also said all of these provisions do have to go out to community engagement so they can actually then hear input from the community on the
I'm
draft.
glad that would,
articles.
yeah,
So,
okay, so that's
yeah.
really helpful because I didn't attend the meeting, but I'm
Mhm.
glad that you heard that said, and I
Mhm.
think that's
Mhm.
what I've imagined as I've thought about the process.
Mhm.
So I'm glad I'm not wrong in thinking that it isn't a runaway train that doesn't have, in my opinion, doesn't have built-in guardrails. I don't know that that's the same opinion of other folks, but I think it's good to hear the committee saying that we're pursuing this, but there's a place for input
Right.
to better inform whether
Right.
we make that recommendation or not. And
Right. Because they have to.
to me,
ultimately-
that's the message we
Yeah.
should be sending to folks.
Yeah,
But-
and that participation by them is huge because they're really gauging, why put something out if nobody's going to vote for it. Right.
Well, I'm
Like,
glad
like
that
we're doing all
conversation's
this-
happening.
Yeah, I mean, there was
Does
some
that
people
make
talked
sense?
about that. Yeah. Yeah, that it's like we're doing all this as this committee to put something together so we can at least propose it and get input. But I am hearing that as part of this process, which takes time, like we know, right, that they're waiting for that community input. So to the extent that we can assist with
Mhm.
really making sure there's full community input into that draft, I think is helpful. Because I
Mhm.
think they're waiting to hear that it is a big part of what they're doing and why they're trying to get this draft so they can
Mhm.
then get that input.
Do you
Yeah.
know, Liz, who constitutes the community engagement subcommittee of the merger study committee? Or do they have a subcommittee yet? Or is it just us
They do
formal?
not have, to the best of my knowledge, they do not have their
Okay.
own subcommittee on it at this point.
Well,
Mhm. But again, just if we can dovetail with them or help with, really
yeah,
being robust in input. I think, yeah, again, that would just be great because it really is a huge part of all the work that we're doing to really fully engage on what does a merger really mean and what do our district really feel about it.
Yeah.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
Mhm. Sweet. Well, thank you so
all
much.
right. Yeah, and I just, I don't know if you can hear us, Donna. I see that you're there and I'm glad you're listening. And if you have anything you want to share, please go ahead.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What I cannot get into my head. What is bounded autonomy? What does that mean?
That is a great question and probably a term we need to ask help identifying. So I'm not sure I'm the expert on what that means, but I'm going to give you what I think it might mean, and maybe Sandy and Liz can add to that.
Okay.
But I'm also going to make a note that it's something we should be more clear about and get information on. What I think it means is that you provide more opportunities for leadership and ownership over parts of a system, but with some boundaries. So for example, in our school district, it might mean giving principals more authority over key components of their budget and staffing, not the whole district budget and not all staffing decisions, but giving them more autonomy and decision-making power than they currently have.
So does it refer just to principals? Is this applying just to principals?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that. Sandy and Liz, do you guys have anything to add?
No, I thought that was a nice definition. And I don't know if it goes beyond principles or not. Liz?
Yeah, I would say that the interesting thing about it to me is the definition you gave, yes, Krista, and also that so there's still, so I wouldn't know. Well, okay, so I guess the only thing I would add is I think beyond principals would be like if they had committees within their school or with it, then they got feedback directly from staff, it could go beyond that. One of the things to think about and consider during this is that we'll still be sharing staff across the district. So we'll be sharing special educators, we'll be sharing support staff, we'll still be sharing people. And part of that sharing means that maybe the special ed person can be there in the morning and their math person comes in the afternoon. So there's still win blocks, fit blocks. Sometimes they're sharing like even Mount Abe and Bristol Elementary, I'm not sure if it's right now that they are, but they were a couple of years ago, had a phys ed teacher that went back and forth. So it's not even necessarily on scheduling per se. So I think that's what a lot of people are interested in flexibility around. And I'm not sure that this will let that show up, but it requires, one thing that's been noticed about it is it requires a lot more awareness of the schedule and of finances than currently. It's more responsibility there than principals are typically asked to do. So it'll be really interesting for us as a board when Patrick and the principals come back to us with a plan about how they want to make this work or how it could work for them or how they plan to approach it, to see how they're all feeling about it once they've fleshed out some of the details that we really don't know at this time, really what it will look like. So I think it's a great question. I'm very anxious for the answer as well. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more.
And Donna, I
Yes.
was just in Nate Levinson's report, I think it is page 24. I'm pretty sure it's still that page, but he actually has a whole section defining bounded autonomy.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you, I'm pretty sure in our website, you can get to Mr. Levinson's report. Hopefully you have access to that. And because it is pretty, there's a lot of information there and it would take me a while to fully absorb it as well. And there's some acronyms again that I don't know off the top of my head. So I couldn't tell you what it all is, but there's a good a weighted student funding. That's where it is. There's a good section that talks about it too. And I agree with both Krista and Liz that there'll be more information about that as we continue to work on how it is specifically may apply for us.
Well, thank you. This probably, I don't know if this is stupid, so it doesn't have anything to do with the policy governance. It doesn't have anything to do with how meetings are run well, you said it would make more responsibility for the principals, so that's I guess why I asked it. But they're two separate things. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say they're different. Mhm.
Okay.
It's kind of like a difference in the way that because our only direct employee is the superintendent, right? And then he's the CEO type position of all of the staff, right? So what this is just a difference in the way that he's operating the district. So versus a difference in the way that the board is operating.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can understand that a little bit. So thank you very much. And I'll look that up for a better definition. And thank you. That was about my only question, I guess. And
Well, I'm glad you asked, Donna. And when Nate, he's going to come to our board on April 26th, and he's going to review more in detail what he hopes to do to help implement bounded autonomy and cost effectiveness in our district. And so
Yeah.
he'll probably touch upon it then as well.
Okay.
So you can look
Thank
out
you.
for that.
I
Yeah.
will. I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another good thing that might be exciting too coming up, Donna, is that we've asked the superintendent to get feedback from the principals about school-based councils. So we are definitely looking at seeing how they feel about that and how that would work and what that could look like. And that's kind of a piece of, I think, I can't really say anything about it at this point, but I know that we're looking for that to be a way for direct involvement with the schools and a little more school specific engagement opportunity. So that when we know more about that, we'll definitely get that out to you too.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay. So I think we've hit all the things we were going to hit. And unless there's anything else on anybody's mind that you want to be sure to share now, we can adjourn our meeting. So anything else from anybody that you want to get out there in the universe?
All good.
Okay.
Thanks, Krista.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to adjourn us at 7:17. And if you, Liz and Sandy, if you will both chime in when I report to the board about what were our next steps, that would be helpful if you hear me miss something or want to add anything. So
Absolutely. Thanks, Krista.
great. All right. Enjoy the free 45 minutes you just earned. Take care.